is going on, everyone? This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast, episode 37, coming your way. My name's Meek. I got my man Wu with me. Wu, preseason's all done, brother. Now real football is coming up. Like the next time we get some football, it's real.
Yeah.
Like I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm sick of staring at my fantasy teams that I've drafted already. I'd like to start watching the games and see some of those sleeper touchdown notifications.
Listen, tell me it's not going to hit so hard that like first Sunday you sit on the couch, pull up Red Zone, Scott Hansen comes on. It just feels like it's an old friend coming back and saying, having 7 hours of commercial-free football.
Yeah, and
Like,
then 4:30 rolls around. I'm just getting destroyed week one in fantasy. Like I can't wait.
yep, all the parlays are gone and
Yep.
and all that stuff. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we got a banger episode for you today. Today's episode is our My Guys episode of 2025. We will get into that as the show goes on, but strap in because you got a good episode on your hands. Just top of the show. We have officially hit 2,000 plus plays across Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and
Let's
YouTube.
go.
Thank you, folks, to the folks that are listening on the audio formats and the folks who are watching on the video formats like you are right now. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials: Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy, YouTube at Fourth and Fantasy. Make sure you give us a like, a follow, share, 5-star rating on all the socials, and leave a comment because you may see yourself on the show, like our good friend Jack R from TikTok. So Jack R had sent us a DM. He's already drafted his team, trying to work some trades for week one, and he came in and asked the question: would you trade Omarion Hampton, Josh Downs, and David Njoku for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers? What do you feel about this one, Will? This
Immediate,
trade?
yes. It's not even a question in my mind. I would much rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers compared to Hampton, Downs, and Njoku. Honestly, really has nothing to do with Hampton. I do like Hampton this year. However, Josh Downs and David Njoku, do I trust their quarterback situation at all? Easy answer, no.
Yeah,
Then you get to add Brock Bowers, who's going to be a 1,000-yard guy, probably over 100 receptions. Lit the world on fire last year in his rookie season. I expect him to only get better this year, especially with Geno Smith playing quarterback now. Definitely going to see some better quality targets for him. And then Marvin Harrison, we both expect him to be a breakout candidate this year. Last year was definitely disappointing for how highly he was being drafted. So yeah, no, I'm all in on the MHJ and Bauer side of this trade. I mean, yeah, I like Hampton, but the production you're going to get from him is not going to be anywhere close to what you can get from Marvin Harrison and Bowers. And then again, just Downs and Njoku, like they're just on two offenses that I'm not necessarily excited about.
yeah, and I'm also an immediate yes for this trade, but just to give some context, because he had sent what his roster is currently. So he's in a 14-man league PPR roster. Is his quarterback is Dak. His running backs are Jameer Gibbs and Chase Brown. His wide receivers are Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers. Tight end was, if he before this trade, David Njoku or Colston Loveland, and in the flex he has Omarion Hampton. So for me, it's you trade Hampton to get someone like MHJ, who he's really lacking in the wide receiver department. Then you can put Sutton or Jacoby down in that flex position, and then you immediately upgrade that tight end position from going from Njoku or even Loveland to Bowers, who's the number one tight end.
Yeah.
It's like 1A, 1B with him and Trey McBride, but you're basically getting the tight end one in fantasy. So that's a bona fide like stud trade right there. If you could pull that off, I would do
Yeah,
that in a
and
heartbeat.
and breaking down the trade, like you can even take Hampton and Bowers out of the equation. Josh Downs and David Njoku is not nearly enough to trade for Marvin Harrison. So the fact that
Yes,
you're able to do this with both those guys involved, you hammer that, hit accept immediately.
all day long. So thank you, Jake, for the question. If you guys have any questions, listen, like we've said in previous episodes, we're going through the fantasy year. So if you have questions as the year goes on, trade advice, waiver pickups, things like that, make sure you send us a DM either on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. And you may see yourself on the show. So moving into around the NFL, we've actually had a lot of news kind of pick up recently. I don't think we covered this one on our
No.
last episode, but the Commanders have traded Brian Robinson to the 49ers for a 2026 sixth round pick. We talked about last episode how he was sitting out because I think the preseason game was going on during the recording of our episode. And we were saying how a trade is potentially imminent. And it was like within the next couple of days after that, he got shipped off to the 49ers. Initial thoughts here is, I if I'm a Christian McCaffrey manager, I'm not worried about this at all. I think it's a smart team move if you're the 49ers because you need running back depth. If you look at the running backs who are there, they've already lost Isaac Guerrero to injury, but I think he's come back from that now. Patrick Taylor they lost for the year. They signed Jeff Wilson fresh off the street, and he's injured. Like I think everybody in that backfield is basically injured besides Christian McCaffrey, which is like the most ironic thing possible.
Yeah.
But like, what's your take on this, Will? If you're a Christian McCaffrey manager, are you worried with Brian Robinson coming in, or is it just another added depth piece?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily worried. Honestly, thought Brian Robinson would have a little bit more value around the league. I don't think he's been bad the
Oh
past
yeah,
couple of seasons. So the fact that he's going for a sixth round pick, I thought was a little shocking. But yeah, I wouldn't say that is something I'm nervous about with Christian McCaffrey. Moving forward, I don't think if he's going to be on the field and he's healthy, you're obviously going to give him the ball more than Brian Robinson. And then on the Commanders side of this, they're all in on Bill, I guess. Like I guess they've seen enough.
Bill's the guy
Yeah,
apparently.
and like the only thing I'll say for the Commanders besides that is like just pay attention to Chris Rodriguez. I think he's still a name that you have to be paying attention to. Obviously, the Bill hype is going crazy, and I'm sure in most leagues he's probably going to be picked up at this point. Check to see if Chris Rodriguez is available because for me, like yeah, I listen. I love the Bill hype, great story, but the guy's barely played any college games, and he's only played in the preseason so far. And there's been plenty of times, plenty of scenarios in the past where a guy will rip in the preseason, and then we don't really hear from him much once the season starts. So I wouldn't be putting all your chips, in on Bill. At least personally, I'm still a little cautious. Obviously, it's important that we see that the Commanders are willing to trade their former starting running back to give him run and give him that lane. So clearly they're confident in Bill, but I still think it's worth keeping an eye out for Chris Rodriguez and monitoring that situation.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, and definitely, Bill's probably the most popular one, but in my opinion, I think Austin Eckler is really like the
Or
guy
yeah,
you need
I
to
forgot
you
about
need to
Eckler
keep an
too.
eye
Yeah.
on, like because even last year when he had a reduced role, with the Commanders, he was ripping. I mean, it wasn't there was a I think it was week 12 where he was on the kick return and he had gotten a concussion, but before that, weeks 9 through 11, he was the running back 16, 6, and 14. Like there was a stretch there where that made you kind of like say to yourself, is Austin Eckler like really back? Like, obviously the last year he had in LA was not the greatest and it wasn't very productive, but you know, I think maybe it was just a, changing of the guard because, that year was the Brandon Staley year and then Jim Harbaugh comes in and has kind of really no use for him because, he doesn't utilize receiving backs as much as someone to the skill set of Austin Eckler. So I could see a world where someone like Cliff Kingsbury is very confident in Austin Eckler's skill set on top of Chris Rodriguez and of course Bill being the future of that backfield. But I wouldn't sleep on someone like Austin Eckler, who's going right now as the running back 29 in the 11th round. Like he's like J.K. Dobbins territory for me, like of a value. So I wouldn't sleep on him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point about Eckler. I honestly, I kind of forgot he was on that roster.
Right. Um, so moving into our some more Commanders news, finally happened. Woo. Terry McLaurin has agreed to a 3-year extension worth up to $96 million.
That boy got paid.
Yeah, finally got paid. I believe we were talking about this in our Bonnet group chat, and I think it averages out to about 33 million a year or 30 million a year. But essentially both sides got what they wanted. Terry's going to be, there probably for the rest of his career because this year he turns
Yeah.
30. So, they get the, rest of him and, he finally he plays his, career out as a Washington Commander, which is what you love to see in players.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely happy for Terry, especially since he's stuck it out with that franchise through all the good and the bad and the mainly bad and the mainly ugly. But to finally have a guy like Jaden Daniels throwing you the ball, I'm sure he's super happy to be hanging around and sticking out the rest of his career with Washington. And I think it's just good for like fantasy players like us to finally be confident in someone like Terry McLaurin. They finally give him the contract. They're willing to pay him this amount of money. So I think he's definitely somebody you got to be drafting.
Oh yeah, you're 100%. Now you're drafting him with confidence, and I think now with kind of the fiasco of the offseason, he's definitely kind of been pushed down in ADP where he could potentially have a little bit more value than you initially thought, but there was definitely a time during this offseason where it felt like he wasn't going to be back with the team, and if that was going to happen, I think that was going to be detrimental to someone like Jaden Daniels.
100%.
um, you know taking that ascension into the sophomore season that we're all hoping that he's doing or going to do. Obviously people are drafting him as the quarterback 3 in the third round. So it's like, he really needed his, number one guy in order to do well.
Oh yeah.
Um Moving on to another, oh no, we gotta go to this one first. Texans running back Joe Mixon with a foot injury is going to be placed on the reserve NFI list. Will miss at least the first 4 games of the season.
Are you
Um,
okay, Malik?
as someone who drafted Joe Mixon in our recent Bonnet draft, I'm gonna be honest with you. Uh, I didn't think it was gonna be this bad. To
Yeah,
be
I
honest,
didn't.
you know what I mean? Like I was terrified when the whole news of like Brian Robinson was coming out and that he was going to, be shipped out. I thought one of the prime, places he could go was Houston, and the fact that Houston didn't do a deal because it was only a 6 round, pick,
Yeah.
which is like basically a throwaway. I thought, they had confidence in Joe Mixon to come back, and then to get this news that he's going to miss definitively the first 4 weeks is tough to see. But listen, you gotta roll with the punches. It's fantasy football, and it happens. So we're gonna have to find pivot options. Obviously they've named in this article when they talk about it. They named someone, Nick Chubb, someone who could take it. A lot of draft Twitter has been all over Woody Marks, and
My
and
guy.
there's also the factor of Damian Pierce too. Like let's not forget that 2 years ago, Damian Pierce. I'm trying to pull it up right now, but his rookie season he had a great year, and I know it wasn't with this particular regime of D'Amico Ryans, but he's got some skills. So that year he was the running back 27, and almost had 1,000 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he could be someone who kind of steps into the fold as well. But just a overall mess of a situation.
Yeah, what does Chubb have left? Do they just give him the ball since he's, the bigger name and has the, more history, or is he just at a point in his career where you can't even trust to, for him to carry the ball as much as, maybe they plan on using their running backs? Or is it just a collection of all three and nobody's got any value?
Yeah, that's kind of also what it feels like. Is like it's going to be a amalgamation of all three of them, and you're not going to be able to pinpoint. Okay, this is the guy who's going to, get the most work. Like
Yeah.
Woody Marks is someone 5'10", 208. Not a big bruising of a guy, so he like I could see potentially maybe they use him in the kind of between the 20s, and then when they get into the red zone, they go to Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
But who knows? I honestly, just the fact of like how bad this was, not bad, how bad it was reported, but like how kind of downplayed it was. You know what I mean? Like because
Right.
I think I'm pretty sure Joe Mixon was in OTAs, and then it came to training camp. And it was like, oh, he showed up in a boot. It's just precautionary, blah 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 blah. And then as the time goes on, it's like, yeah, he's not practicing, and it's just like if you're not practicing, then you're you're not getting better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or showing at least that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So definitely difficult, but we'll have to see how this kind of plays out. Raiders wide receiver Jacoby Myers has requested a trade after contract talks have stalled. This one kind of came out of nowhere. This one happened, I think,
Yeah.
in the last like couple of hours
Yep.
that before we hit record, and I honestly didn't even realize that Jacoby Myers was in a contract year. And I don't call me crazy, but like I feel like Las Vegas is wrong for this. Like he's kind of been outside of Brock Bowers is like their only kind of steady force in their offense. So I mean I don't know. What are your thoughts, Boo, on this?
Yeah, no, I was unaware that he was in a contract year and that there was even negotiations going on, if any. And yeah, I think I was kind of high on Myers coming into this year. I thought he'd be a really nice PPR piece as like a wide receiver three or some kind of flex option, later on in your drafts if you hammer wide receivers pretty well. Especially with Geno Smith coming in, I just figured him and Bowers, were going to be the 1-2 that they throw the ball, two out on every drive. So to see yeah, I mean, like Vegas, who are they going to throw the ball to besides Bowers if they get rid of Myers? Like you have Jack Beck, yeah, people are excited about him, but he's a rookie. You have no idea what he's got, and they have another rookie. I believe it's Thornton or Thornton, something like that.
Yeah, Dante Thornton or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but again, another rookie. You have no idea what he looks like. I'm not sure, and I don't even know what they would get for Jacoby Myers in a trade because this team has to be willing. This new team has to be willing to give him a contract. So maybe it's like similar to this Brian Robinson trade. It's a 6th round pick. What was the point? Like,
right.
it's yeah, it's weird for Vegas. It's definitely something you want to pay attention to because if he ends up in a good spot, I mean, San Francisco, like, I mean,
Yeah,
is San Francisco at him? Like, I think that would be great for
the
him.
New York Jets.
The New York,
I
yeah,
mean, let's.
please. I would love that.
I was gonna say, like, I'm looking at some teams right now. Tell me, wouldn't this be hilarious if the Raiders traded him back to New England,
Oh.
to be a Patriot? Because like they have absolutely
And now they
nobody.
get him at a cost,
Yeah,
pennies on the
exactly.
dollar.
Right. Um, you know, I mean, depending on Tennessee's also another good one too. I'm looking at right now. Like, depend he can potentially wreck some fantasy situations, like especially now. Like this is the worst time that it could happen
Yeah,
because like people are it was a big draft weekend this past weekend. Labor Day weekend is another massive one right before the season starts, and like if he goes on the move and just say, let's just hypothetically say drafted like for the Patriots, you draft like Kyle Williams with the hope that he's going to kind of step up, with nobody really around other than Stephon Diggs, and then boom, let's pop Jacoby Myers there, and it's like,
yeah.
kind of blows up your whole plan. Same thing if you were a Mason Taylor fan for the Jets or a Josh Reynolds guy, you're just taking him for the value, and it's just like completely blows up in your face.
Yeah, like if
I don't know.
Ricky Pearsall in the 49ers, if that's another spot too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another one that could just absolutely blow up in your face. So definitely pay attention to this one because, if especially those late value wide receivers, depending on where Myers goes, he could potentially, throw a wrench into the plans of, some of your picks.
100%.
And speaking of another wide receiver who could, throws in a wrench into the thing, we just talked about how, Las Vegas has all of these young rookies and things like that. But let's throw Amari Cooper into the mix.
Just throw a grandpa in.
Right? Amari Cooper is returning to the Raiders, on a 1 year deal. We just talked about Jack Betch. We just talked about Dante Thornton, and it's like,
It's good for them.
I was well. It's good for the Raiders.
Like
I think this isn't good for those young guys to have those opportunities
I was
because
thinking more like on like a mentorship kind of thing. If you're
oh
gonna
yeah.
learn from somebody, it might as well be Amari Cooper.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely on a mentorship. But like, don't you think that he will cut into their reps, not reps, but playing time and opportunities that they get on the field?
I guess, but does he really have that much juice left? It took him until August 25th to get signed by a team. I mean, like if he really had that much juice left and had some sort of value, wouldn't he have been signed sooner? I feel like this is a
Yeah.
last ditch effort out of Vegas.
I think
And it
it's
probably because Myers wants out.
right. I think it's also because of reliability of a veteran wide receiver, in the running game, especially you want to get that going with someone like Ashton Genty, like, Cooper, who's been a seasoned veteran, and has been in those situations. I think they may rely on his just experience in those
Yeah.
situations as opposed to the juice that Betch or Thornton might have. Obviously, I think when we get into the second half of this season, you're definitely going to see more opportunities for Betch and Thornton because they finally kind of acclimated into the NFL, and
Right.
Amari Cooper maybe takes a step back. But that first half of the year, I wouldn't be shocked if he outsnaps them for
Yeah.
the first half of the year.
Yeah, that's valid.
So we'll have to see how that plays out too. Obviously, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, you guys have drafts coming up this weekend and leading right up before the first game, which is 2 Thursdays from now, which kind of it just
No,
blows
isn't it
my
one
mind.
th Oh yeah, because it's upcoming Thursday. I don't even know
Yes.
what day it is.
And it's crazy too that opening week we have a game on Thursday, Friday, then obviously college football that Saturday, and then Sunday is just a full slate of NFL games.
Who's the Friday game?
It is the Chargers versus the Chiefs in Brazil.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so that's a weird one. That one's on like YouTube. I don't know why.
Oh, what?
Yeah, it's not even on like Thursday Night Football taking it on a Friday or anything. Like it's on like actual YouTube, not even YouTube TV.
Unreal.
So craziness that the NFL just basically takes over whatever day of the week they want at this
Yep,
point.
sure do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to get into the, meat of this episode. So, like I said, we're talking my guys. So this episode is basically designed for Wu and I to kind of plant our flag on a
I was
select few.
just gonna say that. What the hell?
What were you gonna say?
Like that we're planting our flags in these guys.
Right? Yeah. So we're planting our flag on these players. Some of these are not going to be shockers to you at all if you've
Yeah, if you've
been
been listening.
listening since the start of this. Like you could probably pick out who me and Woo's my guys are. But if you're someone who's just kind of popped onto the during the training camp season and through draft season, some of these may come as a surprise to you. So what I'm thinking, Woo, is I think we'll just go alternate back and forth. So I'll take the first one, kick it over to you,
I
and
like
then
it.
we'll go back and forth until we each have three, and we'll kind of go from there. So I'm gonna kick it off. I'm going to start with this player. I was, talked about this player a lot back in, March and April leading up to the draft season, and just kind of called the shot where if a certain situation had happened for this player, I could totally see myself being all in. Right now he's going as the quarterback 23 in the 16th round, so he's basically undrafted. In most leagues. And I'm talking about Panthers quarterback Bryce Young. So the reason why, Bryce Young is a my guy this year, is you have to look back at, late last season. We talked about how, he had a terrible first, 3 games and then he's benched, finally comes back in week 8. And, from week 8 on, he was averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game and was ranked as the quarterback 15. So, not really there at that, quarterback one. He was right on the fringe of the quarterback one territory, but definitely had some weeks during that stretch where he was definitely a quarterback one. Um, and then from week 12 on, just like I was saying, he averaged 21.1 fantasy points per game and finished as the quarterback 11 in that stretch. So then you started to kind of see that, the promising, pieces of that. And over his last 3 games, he posted top 2 QB finishes and, had 36 points, fantasy points in week 18. The reason kind of why he had such a great second half of the season was he started to rely on his legs. Obviously Bryce Young was someone who came out of Alabama, and we talked about his mentals and his processing and things like that, and it didn't look like that was working for him. And that's, he tried to rely on that too much. And that's what kind of got him in trouble and eventually got him, benched for Andy Dalton. But, in the second half, he was averaging 6.1 yards per carry, ranking third among quarterbacks with 500 plus rushing yards over the past 2 seasons. And he was only behind, someone like Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. So that's amazing company to be in. The question is that going to continue going into 2025? That remains to be seen. The next thing that I want to kind of point out with this is that he is tied to a great coach who is, you know, obviously I probably would put Kevin O'Connell ahead of him, but other than that, I don't think I'd put another coach above Dave Canales as someone who can develop quarterback talent. Because we've seen it now two different times when he was in Seattle with Geno Smith and reviving that career, and then the following year just ripping it and doing it with Baker Mayfield. It definitely took a while for Bryce Young, but I think you're starting to see him really fit into what Dave Canales wants to do scheme wise, and he's definitely kind of streamlined the progressions that he has had and made faster kind of decision makings. And then the big piece here that we've all been waiting for, that I kind of said in the offseason, was if they could get him a dominant number one wide receiver, this could be the thing that changes it all. And here comes in, Teteroa McMillan, who was a beast in college football playing for Arizona. He had multiple years where he had like 1,300 plus receiving yards, and it's just a perfect alpha one receiver for Bryce Young, to rely on and to throw to. And on top of it, he still has, Xavier Legette, who showed some flashes. I don't think we think he's a wide receiver one, but I think he could be a really good two. And then you get the twilight years of someone like Adam Thielen, where now it looks like he's actually got some weapons to go to, and it doesn't have to, rely on Thielen and Leggett, you know what I mean? And now you have McMillan. So, these are all the reasons why Bryce Young is my guy. So that, and I'm excited to kind of stand on business with him this year, and see how he does.
Yeah, I mean, those are some damn good reasons. I as people know, I also like Bryce Young this year. You're definitely higher on him than I am, but I listen, based off all those points, like you're kind of getting me fired up right now
Right.
for Bryce Young. I think it's two things that I want to mention for Bryce Young. It's confidence and comfortability. We hear athletes talk about all the time. The quicker you're able to become comfortable in a game, the game slows down, feels like second nature, and that was what that's what Bryce Young lacked for the first year, year and a half, 2 years
Yeah,
of his
look, it was
career.
just rushing everything.
There was zero comfortability. There was zero confidence in anything that he was doing. And there's a chance it probably wasn't even his fault. It might have been the organization around him. Who knows? Could have been just something going on in his own head. Being the first overall pick, it's high pressure stuff. Something that we'll never know what that feels like. So it's easy for us to kind of sit back and say, "Oh, this guy's a bust," this and that. But you have no idea what kind of pressure these guys are going through. So to see that confidence and that comfortability, over those last 3 or 4 games last year, it's like that is it right there. Like,
Right.
this is what we've been waiting for. He was the number one pick for a reason. He was the starting quarterback at Alabama for a reason. So yeah, I mean, for all those reasons, I'm definitely in on Bryce Young.
And listen, I'm not sitting here telling you to take him with like your, ninth, 10th, even 11th round pick. Like
He's free.
he's free. You can literally let the draft play out how you want it to go. And if you take a player like prime example, if you took someone like Joe Mixon and, you have an IR spot in your league, throw him in the IR spot, and then you
Yep,
pick up, Bryce Young, especially if you're someone who drafted Teterow and McMillan. I feel like it's a mandatory thing that you have to find a way to, pick up Bryce Young before week one, excuse me, before week one
100%.
happens. Because, I mean, I'm not saying that, the Jacks, because Carolina plays Jacksonville week one. I'm not saying that, the Jaguars have like Swiss cheese of a defense, but if he goes out and lights it up
Just rips.
and rips, like, I don't think you'll be able to,
No,
like, he might be a hot waiver pickup for week two. So you might want to
100%.
just do it now and be ahead of the curve.
Oh yeah.
So Will, I'm going to kick it to you. Why don't you give us your first, my guy?
Yeah, I'm excited about this guy. It's going to be a Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I love it.
Right now, his ADP is at the 812, so kind of similar to Bryce Young, where you're getting him at a cost. If it does blow up in your face, it's not going to kill you. Yes, the eighth round is a lot different than towards the end of a draft like Bryce Young. But for all of these reasons, I think he's going to be a steal. First, we have to talk about the elite college pedigree, of going to Ohio State. Top prospect coming out of Ohio State, been around guys like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, that list can go on and on. If future guys like Jeremiah Smith, who people think is the best college wide receiver of all time and could go number one in the
I saw
draft.
he's a Heisman Trophy finalist in the preseason right now.
Exactly. So like we have to mention that, that college presence that he had at Ohio State. The route running is awesome. Great hands. He can move with the ball after the catch. And it's traits like this that will translate very well to the NFL early on in a career. And I think he has a clear path to targets. We've talked about Chris Godwin, a lot this summer and this injury that he's coming back from. It was a pretty ugly one. And for a while, I was like, oh, Chris Godwin would be back week one. Those were the reports we were hearing. And then as we get closer and closer to the end of camp, it was like, oh, maybe he's not going to be, maybe they're going to give him his time. And I think they are going to give him time. They eventually put him on the pup. He's going to miss the first 4 games of this year. And I think Tampa Bay is allowing Chris Godwin to take some time to fully recover because they have the luxury of doing so with taking Emeka Egbuka in the first round. And this is now going to clear up plenty of opportunities for him. We've seen Baker sling the ball like crazy. Liam Cohen is gone, and we saw last year how dominant that run game was. Maybe they kind of step back and say, okay, well now we got Baker who's coming off a 4,000 yard year. We're bringing in a guy like Egbuka, who can take the place of Chris Godwin for now, and be serviceable. And I think he's going to be well past that serviceable trait. But being next to a guy like Mike Evans, great person to learn from, like we mentioned with Amari Cooper, except he's even better in my opinion. And then again, just being around a veteran like Chris Godwin, it's just the situation that he's in right now, I think worked out so perfectly for him. And again, I just think his skill set is like super like well tailored for kind of walking into an NFL spot, and being able to contribute early and often. We talked about it in the pre-draft process. We both thought he was easily the most polished wide receiver
Oh,
in
for
this
sure.
draft class, like so pro ready. And again, like I think the role that he's gonna be playing right now is gonna be pretty fantasy friendly because of lacking Chris Godwin to start the year. Mike Evans is getting older. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Mike Evans is going to be a bust, but he's at that part in his career where it's like he's not the guy he used to be. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Igbuka early on. And with that, like because of the talent in the player that I think he's going to be in the NFL, I just think he's going to take this role and he's not going to give it up for the rest of the year, whether Chris Godwin is fully healthy or not, or Mike Evans is on top of his game or not. Like he will be a part of this offense, especially when you have a guy like Baker Mayfield who can spread it around and make all of these guys fantasy relevant all at the same time. And like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to drafting him, you're taking him at the end of the eighth round. At that point, he's maybe a flex, maybe a bench spot, but he's not someone you necessarily have to rely on starting week one. So again, if you think he's going to get off to a slow start, which we do see with typically with rookie wide receivers, and any just rookies in general, it is a slow, gradual uptick throughout the year. So if you're not confident with him early on in the year, you can draft him at the 8, 12 or the ninth round, whatever the case is, and kind of let him sit on your team for a little bit, watch and see how these games are going. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later that he's somebody that you can rely on to start on a week to week basis. So yeah, it's really all of these things when it comes to who he was in college, where he went to college, because I think that's very, very important. And then the situation that he finds himself in, I just think it all worked out super well for him.
Yeah. Um, I'm fired up about this one, and I love Ibuka. Just a couple of things, just to strengthen your points. So just on the topic of Chris Godwin, we got some news a couple of days ago that the Buccaneers plan to activate Chris Godwin from the pup list and just carry him on the 53-man roster when the season begins. But so he'll be eligible to practice, but according to Adam Schefter, he's looks like he's unlikely to play until October. I won't be shocked unless if it's like the end of October, you know what I
Right.
mean? So that's just right there. You get at least 6 weeks of, Ibuka as the wide receiver two to go ahead with, Mike Evans. Totally agree with, him being the most polished receiver, of this draft. And to be honest with you, with the situation that he's in with Baker Mayfield, and just like you said, even if Mike Evans does take a step back because he's 30 years old or anything like that, like he could be the dude. And the thing that kind of like I might say something crazy here, and like
Do it.
walk me back if I do, but like this almost reminds me of like like Justin Jefferson type deal where like there was definitely some promise, with Justin Jefferson out of LSU, but he kind of fell to the late, like it was 22 Minnesota took him at, and he was decent, you know what I mean, shared the field with Thielen, but it wasn't until like I can't remember what week their bye was, but it was late in the season. And then that second half of the year just absolutely dominated. And I'm looking at their schedule, the Buccaneers, they have a week 9 bye.
Yeah.
And just like
Get ready
after
for a playoff run,
that,
baby.
that's what I'm saying. Like he has a week 9 bye, and that NFL teams love to just like come out of that bye, and they, obviously they do that self assessment of their team and what they got, and a lot of times it's like, let's just get this dude the ball. And they have games where it's going to be shootouts. You know what I mean? Like New England, not so much coming off the bye, but then Buffalo, the Rams, potentially Arizona. You know what I mean? They have a game against Miami, but like I could just see him just taking over like. I'm not saying he is Justin Jefferson, but taking over like Justin Jefferson did his rookie year in the second half of the year.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to mention, I know I've talked about on the show before. I could sit here and throw all these stats at you all I want, all these different numbers, but I think another big thing that is huge for Igbuka is, we just talked about, or I just, mentioned that you went to Ohio State with all of these big names. He was never the big man on campus. He is a wide
Nope.
receiver at The Ohio State University, and he was never the big man on campus. And we see what the college landscape looks now with NIL. These kids are moving around like it's free agency. Who's got the most NIL money for me? And what does Emeka Egbuka do? He stays at Ohio State for his whole career. Grinds it out on the big stage. Again, never being the top guy. He wasn't even the top guy last year. It was the freshman Jeremiah Smith.
Right.
So I just think it's such an important like character piece that you can see this guy stick it out at Ohio State and, not wanting to just move on because he wasn't the top guy on campus.
And I think he has the school record for receptions in a like career as like a Ohio State player because
Right.
he stuck around for 4 years. You know what I mean? So like the dude's got talent. That's
Yeah.
all. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I'm all in.
I'm gonna go with my guy pick. This person I've stayed strong on, even though the past couple of weeks have kind of made me waver. But I'm sticking with Kenneth Walker, being drafted right now as the running back 17 and at the 409. Listen, my points for Kenneth Walker here, is first of all, he has elite efficiency and he's elusive as heck. Walker consistently ranks among the most elusive backs in the NFL. Last year, he was 0.42 in avoided tackles per attempt, which is the highest mark in PFF's 19-year data list, with at least 50 carries. The next best one was 0.31. So, which is comparable to some people like Marshawn Lynch and Nick Chubb. And he's, almost a full point better than what they are. He also received a +1 or better run grade at one of the highest rates among all of running backs, only trailing Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry according to PFF. And then also Walker ranked second in juke rate, and 13th in evaded tackles among all running backs last year. These are the elite traits that we're looking for that are both provide progression for him moving forward this year, and then also a high fantasy ceiling. The other thing I'm going to point out too is that he's a sneaky dual threat guy that I don't think people really understand. Like he definitely showed that prowess at Michigan State, and his rookie year. But last year he posted 46 receptions for only about 300 yards, which is a career high in volume. And he ranked ninth in PFF in receiving grade, which is awesome to see. And then in PPR formats, he's someone who's a versatile player that has a good floor, but then also, spike potential if he can get going in the, receiving game. The other thing that I've always, I have pointed out the entire time here is that, he's now moved into a running back friendly scheme. And this team is going to be completely different than what you saw from last year. And when I say about the Seattle Seahawks, because last year, I can't remember who the OC. I want to say it was Ryan Grubb. Ran a lot of three wide receiver sets, passed the ball a lot. And now, they got rid of Brian Grubb to bring in Clint Kubiak, who was, in New Orleans with running backs like Alvin Kamara. He was in San Francisco with people like Christian McCaffrey, and they're gonna shrink this thing down, and they're gonna run the ball a lot more than what you expect, what you saw last year from Seattle's team. The offensive line is going to be considerably better this year in 2025. They took a first round pick in Gray Zabel, who's an offensive guard, but had been known in the draft as being an elite run blocker. And they have a breakout left tackle in Charles Cross, who I think was a rookie 2 years ago, who's just continuing to get better. So I think with an improved offensive line, I think you're going to see, Walker really kind of take a step forward, and that's kind of been part of the problem is the offensive line play, but also Walker's health. And I think with adding those pieces to the line, I think he's going to be able to get to the second level more and not have to fight through defensive tackles and linebackers at the line of scrimmage and potentially get himself hurt. And the last thing that I just want to kind of point out is, he feels like he's a clear lead back with three down potential. So last year he earned consistently a 68% carry share, even reaching up to 81% in week 9. So that the work is there, and that obviously a lot of people like Zach Charbonnet. But if Walker can stay healthy, I think he is way more talented than Charbonnet, to where, I don't see how Charbonnet eats into his work as much as, people kind of lead on to. So that's why, Kenneth Walker is my guy for me.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of drafting Kenneth Walker last year, and unfortunately, I did have to trade him due to every person on my roster being injured. But that's
Yep.
besides the point, because when that guy is on the field and he is fully healthy, oh my God, he is a fantasy machine. Because you're absolutely right, he can be a three down guy. The passing work does not get talked about enough, and I think also because the little passing work that he does get, he does so much with it. He doesn't need a
Hmm.
ton of volume for you to see that be a part of his game. And again, completely right with the Charbonnet thing. Like, if Kenneth Walker is fully healthy, there is no reason why he's not going to dominate that backfield. Literally, I think the only argument that people can have is the health, which is fine.
It's
But
a fair argument.
we can't sit here and predict like he's going to get injured again. Like, we have to be going into these drafts and these seasons, if you're drafting like thinking somebody's going to get hurt, like I think you're just setting yourself up for failure, because nobody can sit here and predict that. I don't care what kind of data there is, like you have no idea. So if you're going to sit here and not take Kenneth Walker because of you're scared of the injury stuff, I I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I would agree. Um, Also just to kind of add on to that, point, I was looking at his box score last year. Obviously, week 1, he was the running back 9. Got injured that game in that game and missed 2 weeks, which is the story of Kenneth Walker. But then after that, he was the running back 2, 21, 13, 10. Had a bit down week at 41, but then 19, 15, 15. Like, when he's on the field and he gets the majority of the work, he's a fringe RB1. And if the health and the momentum kind of goes his way, he's someone, in my honest opinion, I could see him. He's going as the running back 17. I could see him finishing as the in the top 8 to 10 range for running backs
100%.
this year. If all rolls well for him, and to take him in the 4th round behind guys currently, like, hold on one second. Uh, going going behind guys like Alvin Kamara, who, I love Alvin Kamara, but it's just looking more and more that, New Orleans is really going to struggle this year.
Yeah,
Uh,
you just got higher upside
you know what I
anyways.
mean? Someone like Brees Hall, who is now pretty much confirmed that he's going into a timeshare, or someone like James Cook too, who had a great year based off of, a lot of touchdowns. Those are guys I could totally see him, out producing if he's healthy for the entire year.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, my guy number 2, Woo. Who do you got for me?
I got my guy Chuba Hubbard, man.
Chuba.
Part of me wishes I kept him. He was one of my keeper options in our Bonnet League. But man, the Chuba experience last year was so much fun. And these are the reasons I got for you. I mean, he has lead back written all over him, workhorse back, whatever you want to call it. I mean, these guys going to be opportunities galore, and that's what I look for, especially in fantasy. Is obviously you're going after talent and good situations and all these different factors. But sometimes it gets down to like, okay, how many times is this guy going to touch the ball? Because yes, you could have guys who are more talented, but if they have less opportunities, I mean, Chuba's in a position where he can go out and, even on like, not a great efficiency wise, game because he touches the ball so much. He's creating so many opportunities for himself to score points. And at the end of the day, you're just trying to score more points than your opponent is in fantasy. So that's what I'm looking for here. And that's absolutely what you're getting. Last year he saw, 15 plus touches per game, which is just absurd and is exactly what you're looking for from a running back. Especially when you can get him at the 411 right now, which is what his ADP is. Um, Also, just the team around him, the team, I'm expecting them to improve. They've improved their offensive line a little bit. Trying to help out Bryce Young, but then also, trying to help out their guy Chuba Hubbard. They gave him an extension this offseason. I think that's a key piece you have to look at as well because they gave him that extension prior to Jonathan Brooks being out for the entire year. So they were going into the year with the mindset of we know we have Jonathan Brooks, but we're going to pay Chuba Hubbard, the money that he deserves, and he's going to be our guy, moving forward. Other things I want to say is like he doesn't get a ton of passing work. I believe, last year he had about 52 targets, I think, and the year prior, I believe, was 44.
Yeah,
Um,
he's definitely an inefficient person in the passing game, which
so
is fine,
yeah, he doesn't get a ton of work, but again, it's there. So that there will be some dump offs. It's not like a Derrick Henry situation where those targets are far and few between, and if you get one, you're really happy. There's enough there. It's about 2 to 3 per game, which you can work with, and you never know what you can do with those kind of opportunities. On top of how many times he's going to run the ball per game. I also just expect the Panthers to be just a better offense, therefore putting Chuba in more positions to score, whether that be, more red zone trips for that Panthers offense. And like, being a workhorse guy, there is like zero competition. The other guy they have is Rico Dowdle, who yes is coming off an 1100 yard year with Dallas, but I think Carolina would be silly to see what they've gotten out of Chuba Hubbard, and then all of a sudden bring in Rico Dowdle and make this a 50-50 kind of split thing. If anything, I think Rico Dowdle is probably going to be that receiving
Yep.
guy in this offense coming out of the backfield. So again, like if I'm going to get 12 to 15 touches out of Chuba Hubbard every game, I'm ecstatic. And again, with me thinking that this Panthers offense is going to be better, those 12 to 15 touches that he was getting last year are going to be even better opportunities this year and just more opportunities for, fantasy points to be scored. And again, going back to the contracting, the organization believes in him. They're willing to give him the money before Jonathan Brooks was out for the year. So, I mean, it's just like when you can get, especially with running backs, when you can get a guy who is going to get the ball on a goal line carry or on a third down when they need the first down, just having the confidence that this team is going to put your fantasy player out on the field in important situations and situations where you can score, like that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I you are making me feel like am going to regret not taking Chuba in our Bonnet draft.
Same.
Because I had an opportunity of taking him, but I ended up
He got taken in the fourth, right?
yes,
Because it was on the way back because I wanted him.
I was sitting at the 312 and I was between him and Jalen Hurts and I had AJ Brown, so I needed the stack, but I was highly considering Chuba, and now I feel like I'm gonna regret it. But do you feel like with the addition of Rico Dowdle that we're going to see a downtick in the snap percentage that you just to remind you, like last year he averaged 77% of snaps when there were multiple weeks where he had like 95, 97, 89. Like, are you expecting those percentages to go down with the addition of Rico Dowdle, or are you not worried at all?
I mean, yeah, it has to be something you have to consider, especially like I said, Dowdle's coming off an 1100 yard season with Dallas. I don't think Carolina is bringing Rico Dowdle in order to eat into what Chuba Hubbard is able to do for their team. I think, at this point, I feel like you have to have seen enough. And again, I'm going to go back to it. I'm going back to the well here, but they gave him the contract extension. If they were not happy or unconfident with what they have in Chuba Hubbard and his ability to be an every down back like we've seen, last year for Carolina. Again, in a position now where Carolina is going to be an improving team and there's some hype around them, getting some media attention, and especially, with your guy, Bryce Young, the flashes he showed, those last 3, 4 weeks last year. It's like, why would they make the moves that they have just to bring in Rico Dowdle, coming in through free agency and be like, yeah, you know what, Chuba, like, you can rest a little bit this year, and we'll give Rico Dowdle some touches. Yes, those percentages are probably going to come down, but I don't think it's going to be drastic enough to where you're like upset that you ended up taking Chuba Hubbard. And again, like one other thing I want to mention is like to get a workhorse guy like Chuba at the end of the fourth round, like that's hard to come by.
Yes, it absolutely is. Like he seems like he's the type of player where he has so much volume that he's going to be a steady force on your team where like he is a phenomenal running back too. And then you can take a chance at, someone like
Travion Henderson.
right, yeah, like Travion Henderson or like a high volatile guy like Devon Achan. You know what I mean? Like if you had Achan with Hubbard, you get the steady force, the steady work of Hubbard, and then
Right.
obviously Achan gives you those like spike weeks. You can take the chance on a guy like him because you have someone like Chuba Hubbard, which
And the
is
floor is so high.
right. Exactly. So I love that. Um, so I am going to round it out. My guys. I have my last guy here. Um, and it's Tyler Warren, baby. This
No
is the
surprise.
finale. This is
You
the
saved the
finale.
best for
Will
last.
you got to save the best for last? Going as the tight end 10, still going as the tight end 10 in the eighth round at the 804. Again, with just like how we do with Ibuka, let me bring you back to college here with Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren delivered one of the most dominant tight end seasons that we've ever seen in college. 104 receptions, 1,233 yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns, plus 4 rushing touchdowns. So he had 12 total touchdowns as a tight end. Also had 26 carries and even threw for a touchdown. We talked about how, Penn State moved him all over the place, wide receiver, in the slot, in line, behind the, playing quarterback. Like he is just an alpha athlete kind of player. He posted the highest targets per route run, 30.30.5%, and red zone production. He had 21 targets and 7 touchdowns on 16 catches among his draft class. Like I said before, played across all formations, inline, slot, out wide, backfield, and even quarterback. Going into the draft, I don't know. The more that you know, I look at it and see it kind of just blows my mind how the Bears went Loveland over Warren. But listen, like when you have your scheme and how you want to run everything, like you go and get your guy. So I don't fault them for that. But you know, Tyler Warren goes to Indianapolis, and he is the clear, like, before the guy even steps foot off the plane in Indianapolis, we all knew he was the tight end one and was going to be the starter from day one. You look at the coaching staff. Head coach Stain Steichen has a track record for having good tight ends like Dallas Goedert in Philly, or Hunter Henry in Los Angeles, which bodes well for Warren's usage and growth. And there's already buzz talking about him during training camp, where ESPN's Ben Solak has stated that there's no hiding the excitement that they have a legitimate tight end talent in Indianapolis. It's potential close to Brock Bowers. PFF even labeled him as one impact offseason acquisition, noting that he led all Power Four tight ends in college last year in receiving grade, yards after the catch, and missed tackles. he the other thing, and this is just kind of the football intangibles, he's a high character guy. Coaches are already saying that, in training camp, that he already moves like a veteran, has great footwork, he's composed, has great hands and concentration, throughout all of training camp. And then at training camp, he's been a frequent target for both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, and has shown a natural feel for finding space, which I also want to point out. I've had this conversation with Wu a couple of times on previous episodes about how I think the best thing for Tyler Warren and his development and him having a potentially great season is if Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback. What do we hear? A week ago, Daniel Jones is the starter over Anthony Richardson, which is amazing. So with all of these things, and again, he's going as the tight end 10 in the eighth round, so you can fill out potentially your roster. You know what I mean? You can take your, two running backs, you can take two wide receivers, and you can even, take a quarterback and some bench players, and then you can go get Tyler Warren, who's going to have the consistent volume this year, and not have to fight for target. Obviously Michael Pittman is still there and Josh Downs is still there, but Josh Downs is already dealing with a hamstring injury, and Michael Pittman has been known to deal with injuries throughout the year. I could just see that he is going to be the focal point in the engine that moves this Indianapolis offense.
Yeah, you've definitely made me turn a corner on Tyler Warren since ever since he got drafted to Indy, and I was very sketchy about the whole situation. I think the biggest point, and I think definitely the most important thing that you said here with where he's being drafted and the talent that he brings to the field based on where he's been, the opportunity cost for you drafting him in the 10th round is so low. Like it's not going to kill you if he does, become a stinker, which I don't think he will be. So to get him as the tight end 10 off of the board with the possible upside that he brings, just based off the college tape, I mean, it was ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And like he's just like such a hard nose. Like he gives me like George Kittle like psycho vibes. Like he's gonna run through anybody you ask, and then he'll ask you how many more times you want him to do it. Like
Yep.
he's just like such a football sicko, because he can block so well. He's gonna be on the field all the time. Not that he wouldn't be anyways, but he just has all those like things that you're looking for in like one of those like crazy psycho football players. And it makes you think, like, especially for me, somebody who was upset that he ended up going to Indianapolis and I wasn't thrilled with the situation. But because of all these things that he brings to the table, I feel like he can, be immune to those that the Indianapolis Colts basically.
Yeah. No, and I'm gonna say this right now. This will be the lowest Tyler Warren has ever drafted
Probably
in fantasy football, because after this year he's going to go like I think he's going to go stupid, and he'll be a top four tight end drafted next year. So if you're someone in the keeper league and you can draft him this low, you have some great keeper potential in Tyler Warren, which you might want to
100%.
hop on.
Yes.
So I have finished all my guys. Woo, you have one left. You have the floor.
I mean, you can tell by the smile on my face, right? It is none other than Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, it
I
is.
mean, come on. You had to know at some point this name was coming up this episode. I'm planting the flag.
Do it.
It's over. When it comes to Garrett Wilson, his ADP right now is the 311. Crazy insulting, by the way. But guess what? We're just going to take advantage of that ADP because why not?
Yep.
I mean, the talent is unbelievable. Whether, make fun of the Jets all you want, it's totally warranted. But when you have a talent like that, he can rise to the top of all that manure that's below him. So, he's a true alpha one. Sure, he hasn't had the big seasons that people have been expecting last year and the year prior with Rodgers. Crazy hype around him. He was going in the first, second round, which is understandable because when you have a talent like he is, and putting him with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it makes sense that he was supposed to be the upper echelon. But I think he's absolutely a true alpha wide receiver. The route running is elite. The separation ability is elite. Great hands. He can move with the ball after the catch. He has that yak ability. And he's already shown that he can produce with, not great quarterback play. Like I think he is quarterback proof. It doesn't matter who is throwing him the ball. He's going to get open. He's going to get the ball. And last year he finally started scoring some touchdowns. That was the big thing the first 2 years. In his rookie year, he had 4 touchdowns, and in 2023 he only had 3. So to have 7 last year, like that's where we kind of see, this upper echelon that he can get to because of that. You was just lacking those touchdowns. Um, Again, he's quarterback proof. So if you're not thrilled with Justin Fields this year, listen, that's fine. I hear that. But he has played with much worse quarterback play. It is not even funny. It is not even close. And it just goes to show like how quarterback proof he is. That the fact that Justin Fields being his quarterback this year, if you're not thrilled with him, I still think it's one of the better options that he's had over the last 3 years. The target share, I mean, he is the only guy on the field who can catch the ball at the moment, who plays wide receiver. I have no faith in Josh Reynolds. I have no faith in Alan Lazard. Um, who am I missing?
Malachi Corley, is he even going to make the
Malachi, he
roster?
might not even make the roster. I'm
Oh
so
my
sick of
God.
him. And then Xavier Gibson is a punt returner who plays wide receiver a little bit here and there, and he's probably gonna have to play more wide receiver this year. So he is just it's just targets. Very similar story to Chuba Hubbard. The opportunities are gonna be there, no questions asked on a week to week basis. Um, let's see, what else do I have here? I think he has a really good floor because of how many opportunities and targets he's going to be getting on a week to week basis. And then just the ceiling that he brings with all of these athletic abilities that he has and what he can do with the ball after the catch. Like, based on all these targets, some of these he's going to break free and be gone for touchdowns. We've seen it a couple times. The biggest thing is the offensive line for the Jets. They finally have a nice, sound, solid core that they've built through the draft. Elijah Vera Tucker, Armand Membu this past year. Oh my God, Olu Fashanu that they took last year when it wasn't the sexy pick and they already had a left tackle, but they did it anyways because they knew they were going to need a guy like that. Joe Tippmans looked really good playing, and so it's just finally a solid core offensive line that they have that's gonna give Justin Fields time because we've seen the past couple years with this Jets teams, no matter who's playing quarterback, you got maybe a second before a DN's running free at your face. So,
Right.
it's just gonna make this offense have a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Cohesion.
Cohesion, stability. Stability is the word
Yeah.
I'm looking for. Just giving the quarterback a chance to get Garrett Wilson the ball because that's where he's throwing, he's going to throw it. The other thing is, over the past 2 years, how much hype he has had. And no, he hasn't necessarily performed to that crazy hype, even though wide receiver 9 last year, obviously I'm happy with that season, but there was more that people were looking for, and I get it. But now we're past that hype. And now all of a sudden he's become a value pick going at the end of the third round. You know, we were so excited with what he could possibly do with Rodgers. And yes, Justin Fields is not Aaron Rodgers. But all of a sudden, we have all of this crazy hype for Garrett Wilson. We're willing to take him in the first, 1-2 turn. And now all of a sudden, it's like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is gone, and the talent doesn't matter anymore. It's just the guy throwing him the ball. I think there's going to be an extra layer of comfortability with that quarterback or with Justin Fields because they played together in college. And just it's really the talent at the end of the day. He's clearly quarterback proof. The Jets finally gave him that big extension. He is their guy moving forward. And the talent that he brings to the field, the separation is just incredible. He's got two. I'll also say this: he has the 2 best catches over the last 2 seasons. It's not even close. That week 1 again in Buffalo, when Zach Wilson throws the worst back shoulder ball you've ever seen in your life, he has to reach over the defensive back to grab it. And then last year on Halloween, I mean, that might be the greatest catch of all time. I'm willing to say that.
Wow.
Um,
We're going to put it on the board. No
yeah, no,
bias here, though.
no, that is not biased. That is one of the craziest catches you've ever seen in your life. Like Jumpman logo. Like, what are we talking about? But before I just like keep just oohing and on over Garrett Wilson, I need to stop myself.
Listen, it's a great pick. Like, I think he's going to have like 160 plus targets this
Easily,
year, like
easily.
easily. Like, if there was a bet on how many targets like targets versus, I don't even know, I'd take the over on it all day long. I think the key, like you bring up the offensive line, and I think that's such a key point for Garrett Wilson. But I think it's awesome for Justin Fields because I think this may potentially be the best offensive line in the NFL that Justin Fields has ever played in front of. Like, you know, even last year in Pittsburgh, they had a good offensive line, which was way better than what he had in Chicago. And look what he did in the first 6 weeks with that offensive line. So, you know, if you take that logic into, you know, this year now with the Jets and this potentially being the best offensive line he's ever played with, he should do really well and have enough time to really, you know, get the ball to Garrett Wilson, which, you know, once you get the ball in his hands, he just does the rest.
And the versatility with Garrett Wilson, this is the last point I'm going to make. You can line him up anywhere on the field,
Yes.
and he will produce in that spot.
Just
I
like a
think he's
CD
get
Lamb.
exactly. I think he's especially this year. I think he's going to get a ton of work in the slot. And then also just back to the offensive line point, creating time for Justin Fields will actually allow him to run the route downfield before his quarterback's running for his life. I think that was a big thing too, is that
Yep.
when you're running him deep, he just simply did not have enough time to A, complete the route, and B, create any sort of separation because the quarterback's already running around trying not to get sacked.
Yeah, I love it. So just to round it out, Woo's picks are Emeka Ibuka, Chuba Hubbard, Garrett Wilson, and I have Bryce Young, Kenneth Walker, and Tyler Warren. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That those are Woo and I's my guys for 2025. I think we killed it, Woo.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not
I mean,
gonna
what else
lie.
is new?
You know what I mean? Like there's nothing new over here on this side. But ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure you give us a like, a follow, and a share. You know, leave a comment on the show. Maybe leave who, you know, your personal my guys are leading into, you know, 2025. That'd be awesome to see. You know, I'd love to see where other people are, you know, where their heads are at for, you know, who their potential my guys are. But if you haven't already, please make sure you are following us Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy, YouTube at Fourth and Fantasy. Make sure you give us a like, follow, and share. Leave a comment. You know, we only have one other episode, Woo, until we get into the regular season, and we're gonna round it out with a mock draft, right?
Yep.
Start draft season with a mock draft and
Let's
draft
go.
season with a mock draft. But please make sure you are following us, ladies and gentlemen, through the NFL season. We'll be here with you know, projections, start sits, any questions that you may have. You know, we'll be here for you, and you know, we'll be reporting on it. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the other side.